Happy Friday, everyone! You made it to the end of the week. I know it's been a busy week academically, so I hope that tonight you can find some rest for your mind, body, and spirit. And not just here tonight, but over the weekend. I'm Lorraine. I use she, her, hers pronouns.
And I'm Chris. I use he, his pronouns. We're the staff for Claremont Christian Fellowship, and we want to welcome you. Before we get into anything else tonight, I just want to acknowledge the news that many of us received not very long ago at all about Ruth Bader Ginsburg passing away. This is obviously really sad. I know for many of us, she represented a lot, both in who she was on the Supreme Court and positions she stood for. She was inspirational to many people, and we're sad to see her go. I know also for many of us, this adds a great deal of worry and concern about issues that we deeply care about in a season where we were already worried and concerned about our politics in our country. And so I just want to say that we at CCF are here for each other. This is something that we can keep talking about, praying about, processing together over upcoming days and weeks. And it's a time for us to grow and strengthen in resilience and in faith and in being thoughtful, responsible people and thinking about the country in which we live. So let's do that together.
As we start this meeting, we're going to take a moment of silence and reflection. And I want to invite us to bring whatever emotions or thoughts you have to God and make yourself present to God right now.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to tonight's fellowship. I just want to give a quick thank you to Chris and Lorraine for starting us off on a beautiful note and just with an acknowledgement of all the circumstances having coming up around us. For those of you who haven't met Chris or Lorraine, I can promise you, as pink as a pig, that they're both wonderful people, and I hope you get to meet them soon. So, speaking of meeting people, I shall introduce myself. My name is Oluyemisi. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a sophomore at Pomona, hoping to major in Africana Studies. A fun fact about me is that I love the color baby blue, and all my siblings and I are Olu something, Io something, and then last name Belandro, with our first, middle, and last names. So before we get started tonight, I have three key announcements to share with you all. Our first thing is our post Friday fellowship hangout. So, right after tonight's fellowship, we'll be gathering in Gathertown, and it's a virtual space where you can interact and you look like Pokemon characters on the Game Boy Advance, not on the Switch or on the 3DS, on the Game Boy Advance specifically. And last week, we were in a college dorm, and join us tonight to figure out where we will be this time. You're also in Gathertown able to do interactive things. So last week we were able to watch a squirrel on an obstacle course. We were able to play poker, and then we also played this confusing but exciting pattern game called Stack, and we got it in the end, but it kind of felt like calculus for a bit. But anyways, you can look towards the Zoom link in our CCF group chat or on the Facebook group or in the email that Lorraine has sent out. The second announcement, excuse me. The second announcement is our workout with Matt. So Claremont Christian Fellowship offers ways to strengthen your mind, soul, and your body. So Pomona College alum Matt typically leads workouts every Saturday from 1 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. PST, but tomorrow's workout will be at 8 a.m. I repeat, 8 a.m. PST, and then next week it will resume its time from 1 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. PST. And first years, a special little, plug for you. Next Saturday, the one from 1 to 2:30, not 8. Tomorrow is 8. Next week is 1 to 2:30. There will be a raffle for a $20 gift card to a place of your choice. So, come exercise your mind, body, soul, and spirit, and then treat yourself to a $20 gift card. Our third and final announcement for the night is mentoring. So if you would like to mentor or be mentored, you can be paired up with someone to grow in your faith and other areas of life. Last year, I was mentored by a recent Pomona grad, and it was honestly just very nice to have that visibility on campus, even though we're virtual right now, to connect about our spiritual lives as college students. So the next aspect of fellowship tonight is meet and greet. So you've already met me, and now it's time to meet and greet each other in the comment section. So if you'd like and feel comfortable, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat with your name, your pronouns, your school, your class year, and a fun little fact about you. And it could be something recent like your theme for colors this week being pastel. So feel free to say hello and interact.
Well, hello everybody. Tonight I am going to be talking about a topic you probably haven't heard me discuss before, or a term you don't usually hear come up in Christian spaces, and that is credentials. Now, we may not always be aware of it, but we care a lot about credentials. Credentials are what got you into college. All of you, all of us, at some point, some of us in the not too distant past, put a lot of work into college applications designed to show the classes, the grades, the extracurriculars, and the abilities we had in order to demonstrate that we qualified to be at these colleges. We were trying to show that we had credentials. Credentials is why you came to college. Each of you are spending or have spent 4 years of your life. That's a big chunk of time. 4 years of your life, and who knows how much money in order to get another credential, a piece of paper declaring, certifying that you have a bachelor's degree from a good college. And you are going to take that credential and you are going to mention it on every single resume you submit for the rest of your life. It's going to exist in perpetuity on your LinkedIn profile. It's going to come up at cocktail parties and random conversations. Some of you are going to use that credential to get into grad school so that you can get yet another credential. And a few of us might even end up with letters that we get to put after our names so that for the rest of our lives, when people refer to us or our name gets written down somewhere, everyone can see our credentials for our career. Now, I know you all didn't only come to college for a piece of paper. You came out of the noble desire to acquire knowledge and to get skills. Some of you came to liberal arts schools because you wanted to be a critical thinker or you wanted to develop as a leader. These are all skills that you're going to list on your resumes. They are going to become your credentials as well. You can tell how invested you are in your credentials by how much it annoys you when people don't appreciate them. When people have never heard, for example, of your college. Now, I'm going to take these off. I just realized I don't need my headphones on right now. I know some of you have experienced this before, but when you say you're a Pomona student, like me, like I was a long time ago, and you mention that you go to Pomona College, and people look at you like, what are you talking about? Or then they ask, do you mean Cal Poly Pomona? No, I don't mean Cal Poly Pomona. It's a good school, but it's not my school. That's not my credential. And I know this is true for you all at different colleges too. If any of you Scripsies have been asked if you're studying like marine biology or oceanography because people think you're going to the Scripps Institute, or if a mudder has ever had to explain to people, no, it's the other elite engineering school in Southern California, or something along those lines. And CMCers and Pitzer students have it like the rest of us having to explain for many people, this is the kind of college I go to. This is why I'm going there. This is true for all of Claremont. Having to explain this credential that you're investing so much in to baffled family members. Well, I had an interesting experience of this a number of years ago. In 2014, the San Antonio Spurs went to the NBA Finals. And a fun fact about the Spurs is that their celebrated head coach, this great head coach, Greg Popovich, used to be the coach for Pomona Pitzer basketball. He coached there for 9 years before going on to be an NBA coach. Now, this is like one of the very few claims I can make about my alma mater. And so as I was watching the NBA Finals, and the commentator was talking about the Spurs and everything, and then they started to mention, now many people don't know this, but Coach Popovich used to coach Division III basketball. And my heart leapt. Was this going to be the moment that I was going to hear Pomona College mentioned on national television, on a major sports network during the NBA Finals? Here it was coming. I was going to hear Pomona College said. And so I listened, right? He said, yes, he used to coach basketball at... And then there was this awkward pause. And you could almost hear the announcer trying to decipher the college name written on his notes. And then he said, Cal Pomona. Cal Pomona? What the heck is Cal Pomona? That's not even Cal Poly Pomona. And it's like the weird love child of like Cal Poly and Pomona College. I think he must have seen the thing saying Pomona College or Pomona and Pitzer colleges, and somehow the only thing he could think of was it must be Cal Poly, but then he didn't want to say Poly because it wasn't on the page, so he just said this non-existent school. And in that moment, it was like I could hear sage hens across the country just crying in anguish. It was like that moment in the original Star Wars when the Death Star blows up the planet Alderaan and Obi-Wan Kenobi stumbles for a moment and he says, I felt a disturbance in the Force, as if a million voices suddenly cried out in terror and were silenced. That was Pomona Pitzer alumni across the country saying, no! We care about our credentials, and we want others to recognize them because of what they say about us. Tonight's text from Philippians is all about credentials, and it's very relevant to each of us in our lives today. And it begins with some surprisingly harsh words. It starts, watch out for those dogs, those evildoers, those mutilators of the flesh. For it is we who are the circumcision, we who serve God by his Spirit, who boast in Christ Jesus and who put no confidence in the flesh. What a huge change in tone. If you've been with us the last few weeks, you know that this letter that Paul has been writing to his friends in Philippi has so far been a warm, encouraging note. And suddenly it just completely changes its tone to this warning about dogs, evildoers, mutilators of the flesh. It's such a sudden turn that many scholars have wondered if this letter might actually be a compilation of a couple different letters that were eventually put together, because it seems like such a sudden shift. Well, let's talk about why there's so much emotion around these words. And we need some context. The thing we need to understand is that just like Paul is traveling around from city to city, sharing about Jesus Christ, especially in the Gentile world, there are other Jewish Christians who are also going around teaching. And some of these Jewish Christians have a very different agenda from Paul. Instead of spreading the good news to Gentiles who haven't heard about it, that there was this Jewish man, a Messiah, and he actually died and raised to save everybody, and if you believe in him, you can be made right with God and be in relationship with God. Instead of spreading that message, they're going to people who have already converted and come to faith and telling those Gentiles that actually you aren't really saved. You have to do more. Unless you become fully like one of us Jewish people, get circumcised, keep the law, you aren't part of God's family. You are not saved. Why would Christians spread this teaching? And the reason is that all of the original Christians were Jewish. Paul and Peter and all these people, they were all Jews, mostly coming from Palestine. And they believed in Jesus as the fulfillment of their own scriptures, the Messiah that was predicted by the Jewish Bible, the Old Testament. Now, these were the exact same scriptures that also told them to circumcise their sons, to eat only kosher foods, to take a day off once a week on the Sabbath, and so on. And they kept these practices. Even as they put their faith in Jesus, they kept doing these things. They didn't do it because they believed that these practices would earn them salvation somehow. They did it because this is what their scriptures told them God wanted from the people who were in relationship with God. This is how God's people were supposed to behave. And now, the early Christians, these Jewish Christians, had a problem, because some of them had been sharing this good news about Jesus with non-Jewish people. People like Paul had been going out and spreading this gospel. And these Gentiles were coming to faith and joining their churches. And they had to ask the question, do these believing Gentiles also need to get circumcised and follow the law like we do? This was the first major theological issue in the church that required leaders from the church to come together and gather and really work it out. What does this mean and how are we going to deal with it? And if you want to read more about that process, you can read it for yourself in Acts chapter 15. But they gather and they have a big discussion and talk things through, and they hear from Paul and others who have gone out and who have seen Gentiles coming to faith. And out of this meeting, the leadership of the church agrees that no other requirements should be laid on Gentiles, that Jesus is the only credential they need to become part of God's family. And they said, send out the word. This was the gospel that Paul was going around teaching, that Paul brought to the Philippians, and which they joyfully received. But there was still this faction of Jewish Christians who disagreed with that decision. And they were sending out the representatives of their own, following Paul around to these communities that Paul had planted, telling these people, no, you're not saved yet. You have to assume all these things that God's people have always assumed and carried, or you're not in. You don't count. It was hugely confusing and upsetting to them. Some of these communities would write Paul letters afterward saying, why didn't you tell us the rest of this? This was like a bait and switch. We feel tricked. We're not sure we would have even believed if you had told us this whole thing. And then Paul would have to write letters back and say, no, don't believe these people. They're wrong. And suddenly there's a debate. It's distressing for Paul. It's distressing for them. So Paul, trying to head that off, warns the Philippians whom he loves, Watch out for these people if they show up. Don't believe their message. And then he goes on to say this. He says, if someone else thinks they have reasons to put confidence in the flesh, I have more. Circumcised on the 8th day, of the people of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew of Hebrews, in regard to the law, a Pharisee, as for zeal, persecuting the church, as for righteousness, based on the law, faultless. But whatever were gains to me, I now consider loss for the sake of Christ. Paul says to the Philippians, look, they're going to tell you need all these credentials to be acceptable to God. Well, I have those credentials in spades. I've got them all. I'm circumcised. I was circumcised since a baby. I've been that way my whole life. I didn't even have to convert and do it. I was born a Jew, and I can tell you the tribe that I'm from. I was even a Pharisee. The Pharisees were a sect of Judaism where the members just deeply valued the law. They were known, they were famous for their devotion to the law. And he says, I was so committed to this that I even persecuted the Christians before I became one myself. I could claim all these credentials if I wanted to, but I refuse because they have no more value next to Christ. Now, it's important for us to note here that Paul is not disparaging Jewish people or even the Jewish law, as has sometimes been read by Christians and provoked anti-Semitism at points in Christian history. It is clear elsewhere in Paul's writings that Paul loves his people, that he keeps Jewish traditions himself, even though he doesn't see them as necessary. And so that's not what he's about here. This is not about hating on his own people or the entire religion or culture. What he's doing here is expressing his passionate disagreement with any Christians who would come and try to erect barriers between other people and Jesus. And on top of that, any Christians who would come and try to erect barriers between different types in the body of Jesus Christ. That there should be no division or no hierarchy between Jews and Gentiles in these united Christian communities. Credentialism, this approach to thinking we need a set of credentials, is detrimental, is destructive to our relationship with Jesus and to our unity with other Christians. And because we are all so vulnerable to caring about our credentials, this has deep implications for many aspects of our lives. And I'm just going to touch on 3 of them right now. The first is this. We need to stop seeking value in our credentials. This is hard. The world assigns us value based on our credentials. The world says to us, your worth to our company is measured by what you produce for us. If you're not making the grade, we're going to fire you. The world says to us, we'll call you successful if you have the right amount of money, if you have a nice car, a nice house, if you have a typical heteronormative family with 1.93 children. The world says to us, we will treat you differently and accord you different levels of honor or suspicion based on your race, your gender, and your economic status. And as much as we may disagree with the system, we still internalize aspects of these messages, and they come to shape how we feel about ourselves and see the world around us. We gain or we lose confidence based on the respect other people have for us and on the privilege or lack of privilege that our society bestows upon us. We judge ourselves by the standards of beauty that we see around us, and we judge other people by those same standards of beauty. We agonize over grades, not just because we need them to qualify for certain schools or jobs, but because of what we believe they say about us, about who I am as a person. And since we know how the system works, we learn to manipulate it and spin ourselves to look like we're winning in the system. I like this Dilbert comic. It's great for capturing this. Dilbert is receiving his annual performance review. The boss says, "Do you have any weaknesses that need improvement?" Dilbert says, "Sometimes I work so fast that I become invisible. If I seem really blurry right now, it's because I'm multitasking." And the boss is thinking once a year is way too often for this. It's funny because it's only a slight exaggeration. We know that it's dangerous to admit our weaknesses, so we spin them into strengths. And this need to maximize our strengths and minimize our weaknesses, to kind of constantly shape our image that we present to others, has deep effects on us. I know so many students struggle with imposter syndrome, especially your first year on campus. Imposter syndrome is not an expression of reality. We have this feeling that we don't belong, that everyone else belongs here more than we do. And that's not an expression of what is true. What it is a result of playing the credentials game that we had to play to get here. We know how hard we worked to massage our credentials and make them look as good as possible to get into this place. And now that we're here, we're left wondering, am I actually qualified? Others of us believe our own hype. We look at our achievements and the personas that we present to the world, and we say, yeah, that is me. I am pretty awesome. But if we tie our self-image to that persona that we portray and to our achievements, then the result is that we always have to look successful. We always have to be achieving, and failure must be avoided at all costs. Failure is detrimental to our image of who we are as a person. That's a recipe to become a workaholic. And it will lead us towards being judgmental toward other people who can't pull themselves together the way that we have. This is not what God wants for us. One of the key moments in my life happened for me in that first year I was at college. I was in a Bible study, and I had this sudden realization. If Jesus died to save me, then that tells me my value. That says how much God valued me. So why, if God values me enough for Jesus to die for me, do I look at so many lesser things to tell me my importance? Why do I care so much about what my grades say about me or my career plans? Why does it matter to me so much that people all like me and love me and think that I'm funny and smart and these other things? Why am I so beaten down and ashamed that I've never had a girlfriend? And I began to start unlearning that message that the world had been teaching me, that my credentials are me, that they are what give me value. I haven't stopped. I am still learning that lesson. I am far from done. But I'm so grateful to be on that journey with God. How about you? How have you let your credentials determine your value? The second implication is that we need to stop worrying about our spiritual credentials. You know, it's true. Prayer is really good for us. So is reading the Bible, reading other books that help us draw close to God and understand God. So is spending time in Christian community and going to church and things like that. All of these things can help us experience God's presence more in our lives and help us grow. But these things don't actually make God more present in our lives. Nor do they make us any more acceptable to God. That is a form of credentialism. When we begin to believe that it's because we pray and because we read our Bible and because we do these things that we are close to God, or that God approves of us in some way. Jesus is the only good Christian you will ever know. And the rest of us don't come close to God by being good. We come close to God by going through Jesus. We can't duplicate what Jesus did. So we just grab onto Jesus and go with him. I know sometimes we feel very far from God. Maybe we feel far from God because of a sin that we just keep committing and we feel ashamed of it. We feel like we're going to be far from God until we can stop this one sin and pull ourselves together, and then we can come back and be close to God. The thing is, God knows we can't do that. God knows we can't pull ourselves together. That's why God sent Jesus to you in the first place. When we mess up, the last thing we should do is hang back from God until we get ourselves together. That is when we need God the most, when we're in the midst of it. So if you're in the midst of that, if you've been feeling shame or beaten down by some sin, turn to God now, right in the middle of that. Grab onto God. You need God's help, and God is the one who is going to lead you through. God loves you even now. Others of us may feel far from God because we've just come to a really difficult spot in our faith. You're not sure what you believe. Your faith doesn't feel like it used to feel. I know from experience how painful that is. The good thing for us is that God is still with us even when we don't believe, or even when we're struggling to grab on. It's not about how well we believe. God is with us. I always repeat this paraphrased quote from Don Chapman, and I'm going to keep saying it for all of you all until it's permanently stuck in your brain and you're remembering it like 50 years from now. Remember when Chris always said this thing? And it goes like this: pray as you can, not as you can't. Don't beat yourself up for all the ways that you can't pray. Can't make yourself pray on your own? Then pray with us here. Most people are better at praying in a group setting or in a service than they are at praying on their own anyway. Not getting anything from singing in worship? That's okay. Don't sing the song. Use the moment to reflect on how God has been speaking into your life and see if you can find God there. There are so many different ways that we can connect with God or come to know God. There have been points for me where literally it felt like nothing was working, and the place I felt closest to God was just to go out for a walk in a place of nature and just say the word to God, God, I'm having a hard time even believing in you today. And let God meet me in whatever ways that could happen. We do what we can, not what we can't. And God meets us there and leads us through to greener pastures. Honestly, I would rather be in a room full of people who are struggling just to show up for God than be in a room full of Christians who think they're nailing this Christian thing. So I ask you, how have you been judging yourself for your religious failures and successes? Finally, we need to stop building Christian communities around credentials. This is way too common in Christian spaces. The community together holds a set of beliefs that it considers the correct ones, and a set of behaviors that it considers appropriate or inappropriate for faithful Christians. And then from within that place of agreement, it celebrates the people in the community who hold those things the strongest. And it marginalizes the people who don't, or even in some cases pushes them outside. That is a form of credentialism. It's a way of saying, you need to have all these things to belong here, to be part of this. And that way of thinking does not reflect God's character. There's an illustration for this that we've found helpful in CCF, and we try to talk about once or twice a year at least so that we can be aware of this and on the same page. And this illustration involves bounded set and centered set communities. We did not develop this. It's come from several sources to us, and it comes out of mathematics. But the idea of it is, in a bounded set, you're determining what belongs in the set by what fits the criteria to be there. So a Christian community, a bounded set Christian community, might look like this. And the idea is, we're going to draw this circle, and this circle defines the things that we agree on, that we believe together, and the many practices that we think we should be doing. And if you're with us on these things, then you're part of our group. And if you're not with us in these things, then you're outside it. And this doesn't have to be church communities. This happens sometimes broadly across the country in different Christian trends and movements where there's us and there's them. It's a very us-them way of thinking. Now, there is this set of stated criterias and beliefs. In fact, many churches will state these for you right on their websites. Here's all the things we believe and agree. And some churches will even say, and we think these other things are sinful. And they're usually some hot button political topics. But there's almost always other beliefs and behaviors in the mix that aren't even being listed. Sometimes there's hundreds of things, and you don't find out when you're in violation until you say one or do one or wear this certain thing to church or whatever, and someone talks to you, because violators will be talked to. The emphasis in teaching in these communities and leadership is always this: let's make it very clear what the criteria are, and then let's try as hard as we can to keep everybody inside and make sure nobody drifts out there. As for those people out there, that's a dangerous world. Those people are not like us. We will only go out to them to evangelize, to bring them in and make them just like us. And if any of us drift outside into that spaces, they become cautionary tales, things people whisper about. Did you know so-and-so is sleeping with her partner now? Did you hear that former leader stopped believing? Outside is a dangerous place. Just to give one really pertinent example, imagine how this affects queer children growing up in non-affirming churches. This is their church community they grow up in. It's there for them. It's their family is there. It's who they're part of. They go to youth group, and then at some point they begin to perceive that their gender or their sexuality is outside of the community's boundaries, and they're left with a terrible quandary. Do I hide this about myself and just kind of keep this secret, or do I risk becoming an outsider from this community that I long to be part of? I know many people who've had to go through that exact situation. This is credentialism at work in Christian community. There is a non-credentialist alternative, and that is centered set thinking. As centered set communities, we don't create a boundary. We don't create a set of criteria or beliefs or behaviors that everyone is expected to follow. Instead, we orient around the center. And the center is Jesus. We don't assume everyone agrees with anybody else or practices the same thing. The New Testament image of this is like the Jews and the Gentiles, law-keeping Jews and Gentiles who don't keep the law, being in the same church communities and seeking to be united in faith around Jesus Christ and working it out how to do that when they don't agree about everything or live in exactly the same way. In this case, the emphasis is not on the boundary, but on our orientation toward the center. And we encourage each other and help each other toward that center. The beauty in a community like this is we don't have to police anybody, and we can make everybody welcome. Anybody can be part of this community. Even if you don't believe in Jesus, you just got to be willing to tolerate us talking about Jesus quite a bit, because we're going to keep holding up that center. This doesn't mean there's no truth. This doesn't mean we never talk about our differences or have those conversations. It just means that love and acceptance come first. Community comes first. People are more important than our views. And we acknowledge in this that our views could be wrong anyway. Like those circumcising Jewish Christians who came to those communities, they had the clear teaching of Scripture on their side. They could point to the texts, they could point to the traditions, and yet they were wrong. They were wrong to come and tell these other people that they had no salvation in Jesus without those things. We can be wrong too about any of the things that we believe. That shouldn't keep us from being in community together. We need to remember what Jesus himself was like on earth, that he ate, that he had community and fellowship with notorious sinners and prostitutes. He would eat with them and hang out with them and be friends with them. And it was the Pharisees who came and who looked at those people and wondered whether they were behaving rightly or had the right beliefs, the right credentials to be in community with Jesus. Why is it that the church so often sounds more like the Pharisees than like Jesus? I want CCF to look and sound and feel like Jesus. So let me ask, how can we contribute to the love and welcome of this community and to the other communities that we are part of? I know I've covered a lot of ground tonight. As usual, I try to squeeze a lot in. I hope the central message is getting through. We need to reject credentialism in all its forms. in determining our own value, in how we relate to God, and in how we shape our communities. We need to put Jesus at the center and let him take care of our value. Let him take care of our holiness. Let him take care of our unity with each other. We're about to have a response song, which has been recorded for us by Jenny Wey, a Pomona first year. So grateful to you, Jenny, for the time that you put in making this for us as a way of serving our community. As Jenny sings, I'd like you to pick one aspect of my message and reflect on it. I've put 3 questions here related to those 3 parts of message. How have you let your credentials determine your value? How have you been judging your own religious failures and successes? And how can you contribute to the love and welcome of this community and others? Don't do all of them. Pick the one that is most resonant for you right now. Spend a little bit of time during this video thinking about that and reflecting for yourself. And about halfway through, we'll post a sign to start typing those things in. And I just want to invite you to share those in the chat. I think it's really helpful for us as a community to hear from each other how we're responding and growing in response to these things together. So let's do that now together.
I'm caught up in your presence. I just wanna sit here at your feet. I'm caught up in this holy moment. I never wanna leave. Oh, I'm not here for blessings. Jesus, you don't owe me anything more than anything that you can do. I just want you. I'm sorry when I've gone through the motions. I'm sorry when I've just sang another song. Take me back to where we started. I open up my heart to you. I'm sorry when I've come with my agenda. I'm sorry when I forgot that you're enough. Take me back to where we started. I open up my heart to you. I'm caught up in your presence. I just wanna sit here at your feet. I'm caught up in this holy moment. I never wanna leave. Oh, I'm not here for blessings. Jesus, you don't owe me anything more than anything that you can do. I just want you. I just want you and nothing else, and nothing else, nothing else will do. I just want you and nothing else, and nothing else, nothing else will do. I just want you and nothing else, and nothing else, nothing else will do. I just want you and nothing else, and nothing else, Jesus, nothing else will do. I'm caught up in your your presence. I just wanna sit here at your feet. I'm caught up in this holy moment. I never wanna leave.
On this Friday evening, I am definitely feeling blessed and more centered and relaxed after hearing about Chris's message, especially because I overwork myself a lot because I value myself and my credentials. So it's always nice to be reminded through Claremont Christian Fellowship of how I can view myself in better lights that are not based off capitalism's worth. So I'm also excited to interact with you all on GatherTown. So don't leave just yet. Check the Facebook Messenger chat or your emails for the Zoom link that Lorraine provided. And I hope to see you there because, Pokemon characters, Pokemon looks, and you can also customize yourself. So thank you so much for joining. Have a wonderful weekend. See you soon though.